All right, welcome everyone. This is the very latest episode, and today, as you can probably tell by that delightful intro with the space dick, we're talking about The Greatest Journey, which is a Christian mobile game that was brought to my attention via Twitter, and I went and downloaded it because it's free, and hey, why not? So this game is a bit of a disaster, and we're going to have a look at it. I've played through the first chapter out of 12 chapters, and we're going to have a look at some clips. We're going to talk about these clips, and let's get on with it, shall we?
It appears we're ready for our first mission, Captain. Get your crew to their stations and prepare the ship for warp. Dismissed.
You guys heard Admiral Sam. To your stations, everyone. Prepare the ship for warp.
So I can't express how disappointed I am that Admiral Sam is our guide in this adventure. As you've probably noticed, it's a sci-fi themed, which strikes me as a little bit ironic, but a sci-fi themed adventure back into the Old Testament I say Old Testament. We're starting in the Old Testament for sure. I'm not sure where we end up in the 12 different chapters, but we're about to head back to the first chapter, guided by this, no idea what he's meant to be. He's got wings and engines that are kind of like a jet, but he's got this square head. No idea what's going on. As you can tell though, it is a kind of a Saturday morning cartoon, Pixar-y type art style that the game has gone for. Honestly, graphics aren't too bad for a mobile game. Unfortunately, that's probably the nicest thing I'm going to be able to say about the game as we go through this. So let's keep cracking on and see what else we've got in store for us.
Dean, stop playing video games.
Right, this is pretty much the only gameplay I think I played the game for about an hour. No, it was about half an hour actually. And this was the 90% of the gameplay for that half hour, probably 95% of that gameplay. After this, all we get is basically quick time events where we just click a button when a button appears on the screen. So yeah, that's the best part of the game. And it's done very quickly. And that very clever joke at the end, I don't know if you noticed it, but when we thought we were playing the game, we're actually playing the game in the game, and it was a joke because apparently Dean is a bit of a jerk while everyone else is trying to do their work. So very clever joke. Very clever joke, Christians.
We've arrived at a moment in time before time has been created. Nothing has been created yet, actually. This is your first mission, to observe and record the beginning of everything.
And the game is afoot, and we have a really awkward pause. I've no idea why that pause is in the game. I don't know if it's just loading. The game doesn't do that anywhere else, where there's just this silence while everyone just contemplates the horrible, horrible reality of Yahweh being real. Yeah, well, let's go on. I think we've got some exciting introduction of the main, I want to say character, but maybe it's the main villain. So anyway, let's spin on.
Whoa! What's happening?
We need a scan of that quadrant of space. Keep your finger held on the button until the scan is complete. Day 1.
What is that?
This is the beginning of everything. God is about to create the heavens and the earth. That doesn't look like Earth. Drag the crosshairs over the newly formed Earth to complete the scan. The Spirit of God is hovering over the waters.
Let there be light.
That's it. So that is the extent of the gameplay as it repeats throughout the game. There are some moments where you'll tap the button. There are some moments where you will sort of move the screen around a little bit, but that's the gameplay. The rest of the game is indoctrination and a way to, what's the reverse of teach children? Because you teach children maths, science, English. This isn't teaching so much as supplanting actual information and actual education with religious beliefs, because this is the moment where the game reveals that while there may have been some hope by some people that this is a more progressive Christian game that is a little bit more poetic with the way it reads into Genesis, this is completely young earth creationism being taught in a mobile app that is on the Google Play Store, and most likely going to be used by Christians all over the world to teach their children the truth, rather than have it being done in science classrooms using actual information. So we're going to see some of the gems where they get very specific about these claims, anti-science, and just completely wrong, which makes the game go from a comedy of just face palm bad jokes to this is kind of unfortunate, sad, and really disheartening to see that this is the type of content that people are going to be putting in front of their kids on their iPads and their tablets and their phones and all that sort of stuff. So do we have to do this? Yeah. Well, I've already done it, so hey, might as well keep going.
Day 2.
Let there be space between the water of the earth and the water of the air. Let it separate water from water. This space shall be called sky.
Separate water from water? What's that mean?
The Spirit of God has just created the Earth's atmosphere. This allows the planet to experience weather, such as rain and snow.
Down in the comments, explain to me how separating water from water gives you weather. Doesn't make any sense. Like, tide comes in, tide goes out. You can't explain that. That's what we're working with right now, is separating the water creates weather. All right, we are going to spin through some of these more dull creation days, and we're going to get to some interesting stuff. But for posterity, and so you guys can see that I played through the game without using any cheat codes, here's some sped up footage. There's still some cuts, but you know, at least you'll get to see a little bit from every day.
The sensors indicate that this is happening all over the planet. God is creating land. The land will divide the waters, creating seas, oceans, and lakes.
This dry ground will be called land. These waters that are gathered together will be called seas. Good. Let the land produce plants. Let them produce their own seeds, and let there be trees on the land that will produce seeds in it. Let each kind of plant or tree have its own kind of seeds.
Day 4.
Let there be lights in a huge space in the sky. Let them separate day from night.
Tap the button as fast as you can, Captain.
Let the lights set the times for the holy celebrations, and the days and the years. Let there be lights in the huge space of the sky to give light on the earth. It is good.
And so here's where we get to things that start to get really problematic for kids that are learning the scientific method in school and learning the history of our planet and the history of nature. Specifically, the idea that the planet had seeds and plants before there was a sun, a moon, or stars, or you know, the critical sources of energy that actually allowed those plants to live and propagate on the planet. It's patently ridiculous. Never mind the idea that the sun and moon being separate to the stars, and there's no mention of the fact that there's other planetary bodies out there besides the stars that are actually part of the universe as well. And it sort of gives a very cartoon, Fisher-Price, My First Mythology view of the universe, which is such a shame because the universe is such a big, interesting topic to actually read about and learn about. It's something as a kid that I actually really enjoyed learning, which is ironic considering that I spent, age 13 to 21 being a Christian and being in a denomination that actually believed in the creation story being a literal telling of a young earth. So it's really troubling. Anyway, so we also had the very first nod to Kent Hovind with trees and plants giving seeds after their own kind. Don't know what a kind is. Don't know whether kind stop or start or end or finish or whatever. But there we go. We got the K word. So I wonder if Hovind was actually involved in this, or maybe it was Ken Ham. Who knows? Maybe a bit of research I could find out. But yeah, kinds. So that's probably the first red. No, it's not the first red flag, but it's definitely a big waving red flag that this is not scientific or accurate information to be given to kids.
Let the seas be filled with living things. Let birds fly above the earth across the huge space of the sea. Have little ones so that there will be many of you. Fill the water in the seas. Let there be more and more birds on the earth.
God has just created marine and avian life. Ocean-dwelling creatures such as starfish, sea turtles, and dolphins now inhabit the seas. Winged creatures such as doves, eagles, and sparrows now fly in the sky.
And so we see, as we continue from day to day in the creation myth, the errors start to compound and get more and more obvious. So obviously we started with the trees being created before the sun and the moon, and, well, I suppose before that, time beginning and Earth just being popped into existence, never mind all that. But now we get things that are a bit more specific in how we can investigate them, and that is the lineage of life on Earth, beyond plants into animals in particular. Now in this, we're actually presented with a common mistake in creationism, and that is the order in which species appeared on the Earth. Now, we know that marine life was a very early form of life. However, avian life, which is being described here and actually shown as parrots being an example, we know for a fact that birds would not have predated or pre-existed terrestrial animals making the transition from water to land. They wouldn't go from water to birds as we know it, particularly feathered birds, raptors, things like that. And this is something that's directly in opposition to what's going to be taught in schools. And what's being taught in schools when it comes to this content is not a worldview. They're the observable facts that have been examined by science and found to be the most likely explanation for how the diversity of species has come about and the origin of species as it relates to that. One of my favorite resources to actually find out about this development and the order of life as it actually appeared is Aaron Ra's systematic classification of life, in which he uses clades to examine how everything can have an ancestor species that is still the same, but it's so hard for me to explain. He explains it so well. But basically, instead of having a tree of life where everything branches out separately, it's a cladistic system where there are umbrella species, which then diversify into several other umbrella species. And so the example being that you don't stop being a mammal. You're always a mammal, but then you might become a canine, you might become a feline, you might become an ape, but you don't stop being a mammal. And you might become an ape, but you don't stop being an ape, and you can become a human. And so you can actually belong to all these different clades that actually move towards a, if not a singular point, a common ancestor point in many cases. So yeah, really interesting and completely debunks this notion of the creation order given in the Bible, and at the very least makes a literal translation or literal understanding of this piece of literature really something that shouldn't be taught.
And love is in the air.
And love is in the air.
Did we just get a little bit lewd over animals?
Day 6.
Let the land produce every kind of living creature. It is good.
All right, we are getting close. We have the animals now, so we've got everything except for the main event, and there were 2 lions humans that were male. Both the lions had a mane. They're both guys. All right, come on, we're almost there. We're gonna get to Adam and Eve. It's gonna be great. We're gonna have humans, and I can't wait.
I will create humanity in my own likeness. I will create them to be like myself.
Captain, my sensors are picking up human life in there. We're not alone.
The most important event in all of creation has just happened. God has created humanity in his image.
Well, that was anticlimactic. He also said he was going to create man in his own image, but in this game, God's image is a ball of pulsating white light. That's just confusing, and that's your own theology. Like, shouldn't it be like The Simpsons, like a beard and a glowy radiance so you don't see his face and, you know, arms, legs, and all that sort of stuff? And it's kind of funny that it is naked Adam. That's tickles me for some reason. Like the idea, I suppose, that we're being presented with incidental nudity, although he is covered by the bush. It's a shame it's not the traditional fig leaf. That's what I thought he was always wearing. So, you know, maybe they need to check their sources there. However, what's less funny and what's less something I want to make a joke about, not that any of these jokes have been any good, is the fact that we just ended day 6 with God creating man. And yes, I know that Eve was made out of Adam's body, but we're finishing creation with just men, no women. I'm going to pick up this thread after we spin through just a little bit more and finish off this chapter, because the way they sum everything up, I think is even more worth criticizing when it comes to the fact that they leave Eve out of this particular chapter of the game.
Day 7.
My work is finished. I bless this day and make it holy. For this is the day I will rest from all the work I have done.
Day 7, complete.
So the book of Genesis is interesting to me because out of a lot of the Bible, particularly the New Testament, Genesis is a book that really stands out in conjunction with Revelation as books that are mythological in nature. The imagery they use, the stories they tell are so fantastic, extraordinary, and frankly unbelievable stories that they fit right alongside with Greek mythology and basically anything that's been made up. Norse mythology, hell, they sit there with Game of Thrones, Wheel of Time, even Terry Pratchett, the Discworld series there, of course. The fact that God needed to rest, for example, an omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient being who rests, that is inconsistent. It's illogical, it doesn't make sense, and it really pushes the narrative for me that this is a story that was designed to explain a cultural practice that was already in place, which was having the Sabbath, taking a day off, having a day of rest, because, you know, it's quite common knowledge that you're more productive if you actually do take a break from work and take a rest every now and then. The reason for this story of God resting on the seventh day, I think, explains something we did as a species because it was helpful rather than we do because God actually ordained it. And that's what makes it really sound like a myth to me, because it's explaining something, it's attempting to provide an explanation for something that doesn't really need one, that we could just say, hey, we like to have a day off, but you know, probably takes a bit more of a research video to go into too much detail there, but it's just things like that. The same way that I don't want to spoil the next chapter. I haven't played the next chapter yet, but I'm assuming in the next chapter we're going to get to meet the snake, and like it explains why the snake doesn't have legs, it explains why there's weeds, it explains why the childbirth is painful. Like, these are all things that are common in mythological stories that explain why the world is how it is when people don't know better or haven't yet got the capacity to investigate those things like we do today. And yet this app here is looking to explain those things, not using the scientific advances that we actually have access to now and have had access to for a long time, but it's looking to prop up thousands of years worth of tradition as the explanation. Like, it's 2020. It's 2020. Like, I know it's only just 2020 and I didn't have a watch, but come on. At least say it's a poem. I know there are lots of Christians out there that say Genesis is poetic. That's a step in the right direction. At least, please do that. All right. I did promise I was going to spin back to the fact that Eve was missing. So we've got one more clip.
Let's debrief and review the data you recorded during your mission. What did you learn about God on this mission?
He made everything good. Everything belongs to him.
He is very thorough.
He is creative.
He made all the animals. All true, and all very good observations. Captain, what did you learn about God?
I learned that people are unique. We are the only ones made in his image.
Exactly. Out of all the creatures God made, humans are the only ones made like him, in his image. God loves you and made you like him so that he can have a special relationship with you forever. Your part of that relationship is to honor and love God.
And so this is where we end with creation, the declaration that God is creative, God is good, that God made us so that we could have a relationship with him and that he loves us and that we are unique among all the animals. And yet there's no women. Women haven't been made yet, but creation is complete, it is perfect, it is good. Now, I understand that there's potentially a principle of charity here where they just happen to have left the story at that point in chapter 1 and there was no ill will or there was no intent to marginalize women. But that's how it really struck me, in the fact that they could leave the first chapter, they could leave the creation without actually giving us our whole species. They gave us half of our species as far as the creation myth goes. The animals got pairs, like, you know, we saw 2 male lions, obviously, but yet we ended with one person. And that was probably the most offensive thing to me. So obviously there's no sort of shades of how wrong they are on the science, but just the presentation of gender in this particular first of 12 chapters, it really, I don't know, it really stuck out to me when I was actually playing through the game, which, yeah. Let me know what you think down below in the comments. Is it something that I'm being a little bit too critical of? Because, you know, Eve does come from Adam's rib, which I'm kind of curious to see how that's going to be represented in the next chapter, whether it's just going to be a flash of light like a lot of the events were in the first chapter. But yeah, it definitely rubbed me the wrong way. I mean, most of it did, but at least the rest of it is more about just being wrong in science, whereas this kind of starts to poke into social interactions and how we perceive each other, and just leaving women out completely in chapter 1. Not my favorite. Not my favorite at all. So anyway, that's all for now. Thank you for watching me put together this video and have a look at some of those clips. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I did actually stream this live when I first played the game. I just on a whim, I thought, hey, I'll connect everything up, I'll see how this goes, and I'm planning on streaming it again. So for the next stream, I probably will actually set up a live with a specific time at some point, maybe on the weekend. We'll see what my schedule is like. But if you'd like to make sure that you don't miss that, please hit the subscribe button and look out for that when I put up the live event. I would love to have people join me and let's get through this game together. And once I've done that, I'll probably compile that into a clip show as well, where we can talk about it in a little bit more detail and get some of those links in for some of my responses and things like that. So thank you for watching. Again, hope you guys enjoyed it. Leave a comment, let me know what you thought, and I'll see you guys on the next video. And I'm going to let, instead of the normal music, I'm going to let Greatest Journey take us out to the end credits. Thank you. Oh, wait. I can't remember. I did something on New Year's and I've been asked to do it again. Although that was a Twitter video, so. End screen, end card, come on.
Prepare the ship for war. This is a short jump. You already saw where we're going. Next stop, the